Okay, as I said in my opening, Australia, like every other Western nation, relies on electricity for almost every part of our daily activity. It's been historically our great competitive advantage, cheap, reliable, baseload electricity. But that's all behind us now. The more cheap renewables we have, the more expensive electricity seems to get. So I've got to ask, what's it going to be like in years to come as we're all being forced into electric cars and worshipping false green gods while denying ourselves even emissions-free baseload nuclear energy? Well, if the rest of the world isn't laughing at us, they should be. Here to guide us through this madness is Professor Ian Plimer of the Global Warming Policy Foundation. Ian, thanks for joining me. Really always appreciate your time. Is Chris Bowen right about the prohibitive cost of nuclear energy?
No, he's absolutely and totally wrong. And I think we should complain to the Human Rights Commission about him being a big joke, a distasteful joke. He's absolutely and totally wrong. The costs he's not referring to are the costs that the punter has to pay for higher electricity, the costs for new grids, the cost of the environmental havoc, the costs of the hold-ups from environmental lawfare that we pay for as a taxpayer, and then there's some compensation, we also pay that. So there are massive costly environmental delays, and one of the big costs is governments doing nothing. Now, we've seen that before. We had the Gorton government start to build a nuclear reactor. They've actually poured the foundations. And in April 1971, when the McMahon Conservative government came into power, they did nothing. And then when the Labor government came in December 1972, they did nothing. So we can't only blame Labor. The right-hand side of politics has also done the same thing.
John Gorton could have been a great hero of the Conservative movement instead of his other path that many chose.
Well, if he'd stayed in power, we would have had a nuclear power station in Jervis Bay, and that would have been providing New South Wales with nuclear power. We then would probably be on to the 5th generation nuclear power generator. We now have had nuclear power in Australia for 60 years. If anyone's ever had cancer, you cannot complain about nuclear power because you're using nuclear chemicals made in the Lucas Height reactor.
Exactly. We've got a nuclear reactor already in the suburbs of Sydney. It's incredible. One thing that Bowen really got up my goat about was talking about the disposal of nuclear waste. Is he that ignorant that his own government has committed to building a high-level nuclear waste repository to account for the nuclear submarine waste that they're generating through their AUKUS alliance?
Well, I think he is. He's also not aware that every hospital, every research institute, like universities and CSIRO, have low-level waste, and this is spread right through cities. We have waste all over the place. If you dispose of your nuclear generating fire alarm, you just chuck it out. That goes into landfill. So we don't have a central repository for all the waste we generate now, let alone higher level waste that is generated by submarines.
And yet the government is committed to it. They're going to prepare to have nuclear submarines, which are underwater power plants, and yet they're not prepared to say we should have them in this country.
We have some perfect places for it. Here in South Australia, we have the Radium Hill mine. Now, Radium Hill is over 1,000 feet deep. It was a uranium mine. It was an isolated town during the Cold War times. It's on one property, and the nearest town, O'Leary, has 4 people. I mean, that's the perfect place to put nuclear waste, where you've already got the rail facilities, you've got the heavy-duty rail facilities, you've got a road, and you've got infrastructure.
Imagine the potential economic benefit for those people and for South Australia.
This is what Bowen's missing out on, that if we mine uranium, create the yellow cake, make the reactor rods, lease those rods, bring them back, clean them up, lease them again, we have jobs forever in this country. Now, why doesn't a Labor government that tell us that they're concerned about jobs, why doesn't a Labor government follow this obvious economic advantage that Australia could have over the rest of the world?
I agree with you 100%.